I think this one's titled like behind the scenes, and Rob went to law school here. I'm class of 2000. So Rob, well first let's get a quick who's in the room in terms of writers, directors, producers, actors, or none of the above. There's thousands of jobs in the film industry, or there's another reason you came that I don't know about. What do we got in terms of writers? And you can answer more than once, right? Directors. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. Actors. Good. Thank goodness. You don't have to give them advice. And then producers. Great. Thanks so much for coming on it's Thursday morning. Appreciate it. And Rob, you went to law school. I was an accounting major here, former CPA. So we have, there is no such thing as an ABC 1, 2, 3. So is he still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you let's just start with our backgrounds, your road to Jamaica.
Well, my journey actually began in Jamaica. I'm the son of 2 Jamaicans.
Yeah, so, road back to Jamaica.
Yes, I was born in Brooklyn, and my parents always wanted to move back to Jamaica. And for 2 years during grade school, I actually did. And then ended up moving back to Brooklyn for high school and went to Princeton for undergrad. Then right out of Princeton, worked for an attorney named Johnny Cochran, doing criminal law and entertainment representation. And then I went to law school at William & Mary. Got out of law school, moved to San Francisco, worked at a firm, worked for a bunch of tech companies, practicing law, and really just knew that I always wanted to be in entertainment. When I was in law school at William & Mary, I was the vice president of the Entertainment Law Association. I actually put on an entertainment law conference as well. So this is really great to see that ampersand is a thing. Moved to LA, and when I was in LA, just did everything I could to try and find my way into the industry. So I was representing film composers and actors and anyone that would just let me get on set and or just see how the sausage was made with respect to film and TV. And then I met a friend who told me what a producer does in film, really. And did we lose you there, Milan? And shortly thereafter, I applied to the Peter Stark program at USC, and that got in 2012, and that was really the start of my journey. At the end of my first year, I got a job at Magnolia Pictures, which is a film distribution company, and it was an internship, and that internship turned into a job. So I worked there for 4 years, and then found a script that I loved, filmmaker that I loved, and decided to move back to Jamaica to make that movie. And I've been back and forth pretty much ever since. I can't tell if everyone's gone, as my screen has gone black with the wind.
Okay, we can hear you though, and we can see you. So.
Okay. And did you guys lose audio, or did you guys hear me?
No, we're good. Yeah.
So I just told my story, but I guess in 2013, that's when I met Milan at the Cannes Film Festival. I was there working for Magnolia Pictures. And Milan, what were you doing there that year?
Well, that was the year Lifeguard was at Sundance. So we wanted to see like what the international marketplace was like, and party.
That we did, because it was the Hunger Games was there that year. I remember.
Yeah.
That's where we met, was at the Hunger Games party.
Yeah. Oh man, we could give a class on how to sneak into parties. There's classics. But yeah, I'll suggest that for next year. And then You
What's that?
going or?
Oh, so yeah, so you guys did miss some of my story because I literally just brought us all the way up to 2020.
Oh,
So I made Sprinter, and that was in 2016. And I worked on Sprinter with a lady named Natalie Thompson, who runs a company called Cinecom, which is a production services business. And so what production services is, if you go to an island, or if you are in LA and you just need someone to organize your entire crew for you, that's what a production services company does. And she and I just kept talking about different ways to partner. I've always had a vision of building a series of sound stages here on the island. And so in 2018, 2019, when Sprinter came out, she and I joined forces, and we've been working on production services for the island ever since. So in that time, we've done the James Bond film, No Time to Die. We did, last year, we did 2 TV series, which was my first time doing TV. We did a show called Black Cake for Hulu, and we did a show called Get Millie Black for HBO. And I am currently in production on the Untitled Bob Marley project, which is coming out next year from Paramount Studios. So, and then in between all of that, I try and make as much independent content and develop as much independent content and film as I can.
awesome. Thank you. And my story, I think it's great to have Rob here, and then, to be able to share my story. Everybody in this room is ahead of where I was at the same age. So I understand it's a long game. So when people hear I was a CPA or an accountant and then I became a film producer, it doesn't make much sense. But if you follow the story, I did, my first job was the biggest accounting firm in the world, safest job you can get. Then me and 27,000 people lost their jobs because of the Enron scandal. That was Arthur Andersen. So now they teach that in business schools. And that's also like 6 months after September 11th happened. I lost 2 close friends that went to William Mary here. And you really it was an awakening, like, man, like the whole working till you're 65, then retiring, like, what if you don't make it to that age? And I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to travel. So I was in the Northern Virginia, as after you graduate, you're almost required to go to Northern Virginia. And there's like a passport to Northern Virginia, and AOL Time Warner was there. So I worked at the AOL offices out in Dulles and audited Time Warner cable. And I went out to LA, and we had a conference out there, and I met up with like 4 fraternity brothers. And 2 of them were assistants for Dick Clark. One of them was an assistant for Mike O'Malley. They were making like $400 a week, but they were happier than all my friends on the East Coast. And there's something to that, right? And literally a few months later, I was talking to a boss of mine, and what do you want to do? I was like, I think I want to transfer to the LA office. And that afternoon, the senior vice president was like, approved. Like, they're obviously trying to get rid of me. Like, oh, we get a chance to ship him across the country. And 2 weeks later, I was living in LA, and a week later, I'm on my first film set. Batman Begins in London, and then Superman Returns Australia, V for Vendetta Berlin, shows like Entourage, One Tree Hill, and Wilmington, North Carolina. And that was my film school from when I was 24 to 29 years old. You're like, well, what did I do on those film sets? I was still auditing, but is the cost reporting accurate? What they're reporting back to the studio? Is it, are they following studio policies and procedures? And then the big thing was tax credits. It wasn't until the US started opening up tax credits when I went to Dukes of Hazzard in Louisiana, where the Jessica Simpson one that started opening up. And still, if you would have asked me at like 25 years old, or told me I was going to be a film producer, I wouldn't have believed you, because as I joke, Indians from Indiana don't get to do that. And I really kind of focused in on the producing role, because it was this nice mix of business and then a creative element that I didn't quite feel like I was getting from my day job. So they knew I'd be asking a lot of questions. So I just started asking a lot of questions about producing. I was learning their job while on the job. And at 29 years old, it feels like it's a life-changing year, and in a way it is. I felt like it was my time to take that step. So January 31st, 2008, I left corporate America, and 3 months later I was shooting my first film. Made it, and then you start learning about, Rob's original world about distribution. It's a whole other game, and working backwards. And my fourth film was The Lifeguard with Kristen Bell. It got into Sundance, and it's like, that's the year of Ryan Coogler and Fruitvale Station. Like that's what it's known as. And it's like, so that's only 10 years ago. And now it's Black Panther and Creed 3. Even Ryan didn't direct it, but he did produce it. And I learned a lot, and I thought Sundance was supposed to be a savior, and we didn't get a great sale. And so I started making, different types of films, which included a family film with a young man with Down syndrome called Where Hope Grows, that ended up doing 1.2 million at the box office. My Friend Dahmer, about Jeffrey Dahmer's senior year in high school, 5 years before the Netflix series. And then my 10th film, Assassination Nation, sold for $10 million at Sundance, which that team became the team that made Euphoria. And 13 years in, 2 years ago, I got a job as head of film for a company called Marginal Media Works, and now it's like I'm known as a creative exec. But it all started as a accounting major from William Mary. So the journey might not go the way you think, but it's just like you keep that end mind and goal, and that end mind that might change along the way, and that's okay. Rob,
Yeah, it's never a straight line. I don't know. No one's story is the same. Like everyone's like, how'd you get in? I mean,
yeah, and it might still change for both of us. We have no clue where the next direction go. We'll give a lot of advice about these kind of things. Rob, is there a best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
the best advice I've ever gotten has been to network laterally. And what I mean by that is, you get on your first film set, or you're in film school, or you're a production assistant, or you're in the mailroom. And the connections that you make with your peers is really the thing that will transform your career. Because it's true, every overnight success is, 10 years in the making. I mean, Milan and I literally got into the industry in 2012, and just doing my first, studio film right now, like getting to be on a set and see how that all works. And meeting people that I never, one of the producers on the Marley project is Jeremy Kleiner. And we were just talking about just the journey. And, Jeremy Kleiner is the head of Brad Pitt's company, Plan B, but he's also just like a mega producer. And we were talking about the fact that when I was at Magnolia, I distributed a film called The Host, which is done by, I'm going to mess up his name, but it's pronounced Bong Joon-ho, famous Korean director. And Jeremy's now producing his next film and just finished it in London, and just talking about like that 10-year progression of just like the films that Bong has made. And for me, I worked in the mailroom at UTA, and when I went to all these festivals, the way that I got into parties were the people that I met in the mailroom, and the people that were the assistants to all of the agents and or producers who knew their schedule and knew how to get me onto a list, or just would walk up to the door and say, hey, he's okay, and just pull you into the party. And it's a relationship business. And, the thing that when I asked Jeremy's assistant, I was like, what do you think it is that makes Jeremy, Jeremy just sold his company for $600 million. And I was like, what is it about Jeremy that makes him so great? Outside, he's just like one of the most naturally curious and just a genuine, like nice guy. And when you meet him, and she was just like, he just has all the relationships. Like everyone likes being around him. Everyone likes working with him. And he's just when you meet him, he's just genuinely interested in people. And so I would just say, all the people that are probably in that room with you right now, do the whole look to your left, look to your right thing. Everybody that's in there has the same dream. of trying to find a way into the industry. And so, you know, if you guys really, really want to make it, you know, these are the people that are going to help you. You know, you need a producer, you need a writer, you know, who's the person that we know in LA, who's worked at an agency. I really need a piece of talent in this film, but who do I talk to? You know, if you guys network laterally, those are the people that are going to get you up, because when you're not going to meet someone like a Jeremy Kleiner and they're going to be like, oh yeah, let me read your script and make your, you know, $500,000 indie film.
I love that. I'm going to piggyback on that. On my best piece of advice is, and I say it every time, it's like, before I started, and remember I was 29, so older than almost everyone in this room. Give yourself 7 to 10 years to feel like you're heading in the right direction, not to make it, to feel. And at 20 years old, that seems like that's almost half your life, and that feels like a lot. And as people from William & Mary, we think and we know we're overachievers. And I thought, when I heard that piece of advice, no way it's going to take me 7 to 10 years. But if I didn't get that piece of advice, when I got that movie into Sundance 4 years in, I thought I crushed that advice. Like, man, why did he even give me that advice? But then when it didn't sell, like we got a few bad reviews and it didn't get that overnight bidding, and it didn't get that sale, I was like, oh no. And that the Sundance can be a blessing and a curse. But if I didn't get that piece of advice, I think in year 5 and year 6, I would have felt really lost. That I wasn't quite sure if this is going to work. It's an industry that will test you. You know, there's an old adage, like if you can imagine yourself doing anything else, do that. Like there's easier ways to make money. But I think the biggest key to that 7 to 10 years is not just the perseverance, it is exactly what Rob was talking about, is those people that you met along the way. If you've been good to them, like going back to that Sundance 2013 at Cannes that year, well, that I walked into a party, Trevor Groff, the former head of Sundance, put me in a headlock, and he's like, my Sundance family, under the other arm was Ryan Coogler. And Trevor Groff went dancing off, and then Coogler and I just hung out, spoke like an hour and a half, and he kept talking about this guy named Seb Ohanian on his film that really helped him.
Seb was there. That's where I met Seb as well.
Yeah, no, because I met with him and Gerard McMurray, who's now crushing it with the Purge movies. And but you know, when I got back to LA, I took Seb out for dinner and drinks and asked him to work with me on a project in Kentucky, and we produced that movie together. Seb now runs Ryan's company. You know, they were at the Creed 3 premiere two nights ago. But like, these are your, you know, they far surpassed me, but they're your peer group, because you know, Shaka King was part of their you know, Newlyweds was 2013. Joey Soloway, like there was a short called Whiplash at Sundance 2013. You know, a movie that didn't get into Sundance that year, won the short jury the year before, was called Short Term 12. The feature somehow didn't get into Sundance, won South by a couple of months later. And you know, years later, when I think, as the story goes, when Marvel was thinking about doing an Asian you know, superhero movie, Coogler remembered and became friends with Destin on the 2013 festival circuit. And he was like, oh, you got to call Destin. And boom, he's got Shang-Chi. And it's like, these are relationships from 10 years ago. And if you're a good like steward and good like asset to the community, you know, a lot of people, it's like, make sure you're always trying to give more than you're trying to take. Like you meet people at film festivals around the world, and you can sniff out the takers really really quickly. On the flip side, what's the worst piece of advice you got? I'm just making this up as I go.
The worst? Well, you know, I was just going to say, on just piggybacking on what you were saying, one of the things, you know, the thing that you do when you get to LA is you're just always doing lunches and you're doing dinners or coffees. And it's weird because you're always either trading information or you're kind of trading your network. And so I was just going to kind of piggyback on that. One of the things I always just say when I am meeting with people is just, you know, how can I be helpful? Like, I just say that, right? You know, in the middle, whenever there's a lull or the pause in the conversation is, how can I be helpful? Like, what are you trying to get to? What are you trying to go? And if I can't do it, I generally always know someone that can. But I've gotten, where do I start with bad advice? Worst advice I ever got? I mean, let's think. I've had producers and partners, and I won't ever do it again, try to shoot a film without being fully financed. And I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, this seems like a bad, my lawyer brain, but generally amongst my friends, when I'm making a project, they always view me as the conservative one. Because, for me, the lawyer training just makes me want to tick all the boxes. And, there is something to it, to the idea of, with certain things, until you take that leap of faith, you're never going to really be ready for it. There's just no way that you can understand what it takes to make a feature film, especially if you're jumping from like a 6-figure film to like a 7-figure film, or to an 8-figure film, or just project, and just seeing that kind of money spent and what that looks like. You're never ready for a no film experience. I mean, Milan just made a lot more projects than I have, but I don't think any two experiences are ever the same. And so, for me, I always just have to have my head on a swivel and kind of just be ready to roll with the punches. I mean, yeah, I think that has kind of been my experience.
I like you referenced your lawyer thing, because I know at first I was so intimidated by the industry, because like everyone that went to film school, it seemed like they knew the history of every director and every movie. That's what they trained themselves for. And I didn't. I was just I'm still learning it. And so I was kind of embarrassed by my background. And after a couple of years, I was like, these people don't know how to do anything when it comes to the business of it or the legal side of it. And I was like, I'm going to lean into that and say, so it's like, I say this every time. It's like, make sure someone on your team cares about the boring stuff. Make sure because when you're raising money, you can get yourself sued. You're bound by the securities laws of 1933 and 1934, which are getting loosened now. That's why there's equity crowdfunding.
Imposter syndrome is a real thing. I mean,
and it's almost like you're a jerk if you don't have imposter syndrome. It does. I've produced and executive produced 25 films, and there's still times I feel like I'm still getting started, and it's like, you got to be very careful onto like following other people's timelines. Well, they did that in 10 years. I'm going to do that in 10 years. It's like I do think you need to check in, which that fine line between ambition and delusion. Are you on the right side? But we met at there's a couple questions I want to ask, because we met at a film festival, and I think so. It's like we just saw each other at Sundance. Like, why should people go to film festival? What do you go to film festivals for? What stage of their career should they go to film festivals? It's so cool. Like, we're here at Ampersand. I love regional film festivals. A lot of times you can get to know a person a lot better than at Sundance when there's thousands of other people there. I'm going to, I have a film premiering at South by next weekend. Are you going to South by?
I'm not. I mean, we're shooting till April 1st. Yeah, so I'm on set here.
And that's always the priority. People are like, you go to so many film festivals. I was like, look, I just want to be on film sets, but it's a tricky time right now, Thanks, Connor.
Yeah, and I've got like 2 projects, where the writer's strike is about to happen. So I just sold my first studio film with Shaka, actually. So
yeah,
so the studio is trying to rush us to get the project done, or out the gate ahead of the strike. And so I've got 2 projects like that right now, where we're trying to just get as much out the gate or get scripts done. And I'm trying to actually do an indie film over the summer, just because I'm like, if the world shuts down, if I'm working with a non-WGA writer, maybe I can just do like 2 indie films just over the summer to, just pad my stacks.
So on the film festival thing, what kind of advice would you give about going, or what you're looking, not necessarily advice, what you're looking to, accomplish, and what stage of their careers?
Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky to get my first day in Cannes. Scott Veltri and Christina Rogers, who were the heads of the department at Magnolia, told me, "There's no way you're going to get a job here. Everyone always asks, so please don't ask for a job." And I was like, "I'm cool. I have a job lined up in the mailroom at UTA. I'm just going to meet as many people as I can, go hang out at the American Pavilion." And the way I got my job at Magnolia is because on day 5, because I was a lawyer, I was looking at all the contracts, and I was basically, making sure I made a copy for myself so that I had a template if I ever ended up doing distribution deals. And I looked at a deal and the numbers were flipped. And what the producer was supposed to get versus what the company was supposed to get, the numbers just were complete. I was like, this can't be right. And I showed it to Christina and she was like, "Hey, do you want a job here?" On day 5. So when I go to, I got really lucky because my first 4 years in the industry, I was still in film school. I was working and going to film festivals for a living. And my job was to watch movies, acquire movies, buy movies. And so for me, I always just wanted to know who's the hot director, who's the hot writer, who are the people that I need to know. And at that stage, 10 years ago, I just wanted a mentor. I just wanted somebody to say, "Hey, let's come with me, take me by the hand." And that person actually never appeared. Because people are always, there's a part of me that was thinking, I've got to be a producer with a capital P to come out the gate. And I didn't understand all the little steps that you could, make, whether it's an associate producer, executive producer, even though I was servicing a ton of people with respect to how their films got made and how things came together. I mean, like in 2015 at Sundance, my room, or 2016, my roommate at Sundance was Shaka King. I mean, we've known each other since we were 10 years old. And he's like, "Rob, I have this idea for this Black Panther movie. I only have like 20 pages. He's like, "Can you just produce this for me?" And I was just like, "I've never even made a movie." Like, what are you talking about? And he's just like, "Well, Ryan's going to be a part of it. I know Ryan's going to do it." I just said, he's just like, "But he's like, you're my friend for forever. Come do it." And then obviously that film ended up being Oscar nominated. I wasn't a producer on that project. So I was like, the imposter syndrome. I was like, what am I going to do if Ryan Coogler is attached to your project? And so, but what I did learn from that experience is that same year, I met a guy named Houston King. And Houston is a epic indie producer, and I did a movie with him. I think it was called Results or Drinking Buddies. I think
Results.
Yeah. And he was just like, and I just, before I made the movie, he was just like, you just got to take that leap. If you find a project that you really love, and he's like, "Rob, you've been in this industry for 3 years, people. So just figure out a way to make sure everyone, when you go to a film festival like Sundance, they send out a directory of everyone that's attending the festival." And so what I would do is just make sure that every festival I had 3 meetings with people I didn't know that worked at companies that I definitely liked. And that is kind of how I just approach it. Film festivals, it's just like, all right, who's going to be here? So in the same way that you guys are sitting here today and you've got a few more days of panels, look at the list and what have people done or what films are playing, and is there going to be a Q&A after the film festival? And just make sure that, you leave every festival, when Milan and I started in film festivals, people still did business cards. Now everybody's got like their digital card or their QR code. Just make a goal of every day, just adding one person and then following up. I think that is the most important thing, is just, and start building.
Yeah, just to show how small a world. Remember that story I said, Sev. Well, Sev was a producer. Daniel Kaluuya said his name on stage when he won the Oscar for Judas and the Black Messiah. Sev, after Where Hope Grows, guess which movie he worked on? Results, with Houston King. And it's just like, it's like, it seems like it's all like this, but all of a sudden, and especially like you figure out the real people. Like there's a lot of talkers in our industry. And it's like, I think going to film festivals over time, like I look at Sundance as the biggest, our industry's biggest like business conference. Like take away the films, like why would you not show up? A lot of people have that historical, I'm going to go and I have a film there. It's terrifying to go there for the first time when you have a film there. So when it was the fourth time I went in 2013 when we had the film there. Everybody else was a first timer. You don't even know how Main Street works. You don't know where the theaters are. It's a lot. So it's like, why not build that experience? And first Sundance I went to, it got rejected from every party. I tell this story occasionally. It's like, I remember I was about to get rejected from another party. It was ICM. And there happened to be 4 Black women in front of us. And I note their color because there was no diversity at Sundance 2009, 2010, very little. Now there's a Black house. This year they had the first ever South Asian house, Latinx. Macro Lodge, and it's cool to see we've come a long way. So right before we get rejected from the line, these 4 women in front of me get rejected as they're walking away. My friend who said you were great in that movie, and she gave him a big hug. And as they were walking away, I was like, "What movie was she in?" And it was Pushed by Sapphire, which became Precious. It was Gabourey Sidibe. So the next year, she was going to be on the Oscar stage, but in that moment, at that party on that mountain, her time hadn't come. And it's like, it just shows like these are the people that are around you, and whether it's next year or 8 years or 10 years, that you'll see that, and people have a long memory, and they remember how you make them feel. And I often at the first Cannes I went to was in 2012, the year before that year, and it's expensive. And I slept on a fold out couch at Sundance one year. I slept under a pool table, but I'm there. And every year, just like, oh, you're still around? You're still around? Oh, you're serious about this? After you see someone like 3 times, you're like, oh, maybe I should. They're going to be in my life. I should remember them a little bit better. And it's just like you got to keep checking in, and you're still around. And in our industry, it's an accomplishment just to survive another year. And I don't take that for granted. But after that first Cannes, a movie got flipped into a union show, a conversation for another day, but we needed money. And a woman I met from Australia, a company from Canada, and a guy from New York, I was able to raise like $400,000, and went from a co-producer on a producer on Lifeguard, which became my first Sundance film. And I raised that money I never pitch a project when I first meet people, unless of course it's like a meeting. It's getting to know what people are about first, and playing the long game and listening, and then kind of, oh, now it's time to pitch. Because Rob, I'm sure you see it. People see at a film festival, they'll look at your badge, they might even IMDb you, and then they launch into their pitch that they'll pitch everyone exactly the same, and you've tuned them out before they've even started. So that kind of discipline of just, as Rob said, it really is a relationship business.
What's hilarious about that story is
Yeah.
Is I completely agree, and especially if you have a distributor badge, because everyone wants to pitch you their films.
Yeah.
Distribution. And so I went through that, because everyone's like, oh, you work at Magnolia, and then everybody's friend of a friend, like random people you've met, you just start getting emails like, oh, I'm a friend of so-and-so, they said you work at Magnolia, and you're just like, I can't distribute your film. Like, this is not how. But the flip side of that is you don't want to pitch stories, but literally the first conversation I had with Jeremy, he was just like, he was telling me about how he's setting up a movie in New York City. And I was like, yeah, New York City is just so tough, and it's so expensive. I was just like, I'm trying to get a movie up going there now. And it's been so hard. And he's like, well, tell me about it. And so that was real cool. And he's just like, oh, well, let me read that. He's like, send it. And I literally said to him, I was just like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll send it. And then like 2 hours later, he's like, hey, did you send me that script yet or what? And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess he was serious. Like, I literally am that person that you just said, Milan, where I'm like, I know not to be that guy. I'm here to do a job. But then sometimes you get these like random like lifelines thrown your way, because of that discipline.
When that door opens, you better be ready.
Yeah, you got to have everything lined up.
Yeah, that's where preparation matters. You're in Jamaica right now. Most people here, they're in school. After 15 years in LA, November 2019, moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Have an office in LA. do people have to move to or live in LA or New York for the film industry? You can add a slash Atlanta, but Atlanta's a very different thing. It's more about production. Most of the brain trust and the writers' rooms are still back in LA. What's your advice on that? And I know, we have specific stories, as you shared earlier, on how you ended up there, but is LA and New York important?
It depends what your role is. I mean, if you're a writer, you can technically write from anywhere and kind of submit. If you are a producer or you want to be an agent, I would say you got to at least put in a year or two in LA or New York. I mean, I'm from New York, so I had that already in the back pocket. And the New York entertainment universe versus the LA entertainment universe is very different. And I'm biased because I like New York people a lot better than LA people. But I would say you got to build up a network if you are going to be a producer. And if you don't have the means to kind of just travel to film festivals every year, spending a year or two on the ground, I think LA is really tough as a city just to live in generally. It takes you a year just to kind of get your feet wet and understand how the city moves. But if you can get a job within the industry in either of those two cities, the experience is invaluable. And the network is that you'll build from just being on the ground. But it's also, LA's tough also because the thing that happens is you go out and then everyone's always talking shop. And so that makes it painful. But for me, I didn't have that experience because when I moved to LA, I was an attorney and I was working on employment and antitrust cases. So my network were people that were just regular 9-to-5ers going home to their kids and like surfing and just living life. And so after several years in LA, making the switch to film, it was funny for me because I still kept my friend group separate because I don't know, I guess it kept me sane.
No, I won't add too much because I think you nailed it. I do think some time in LA is important. It's obviously very expensive. In LA and New York are expensive. So if you need to stack cash for a little bit, do that. There's no reason not to create. You have all the tools that you can get at a Walmart nowadays. But sometimes you might need to double down on maybe going to film festivals, both big ones and regionals, to make that network and start building on that network. The film industry it's not a passive sport, but that's the biggest reason I needed to move away. I felt like I was being too consumed by it all the time. Like, is this all we talk about? And I felt like I'd get more fresh stories and perspective if I lived somewhere else, but I put in 15 years on the ground.
I think the other part of it is now that I've been away, now that I've split time or am based here in Jamaica, it's actually, I find my career is a bit more productive when I'm in LA or New York because I can just send an email and say, hey, I'm in LA for 3 weeks and I'm taking meetings. And I think before you move to LA or New York, that's kind of the approach that you need to have anyway.
Yeah.
Where you just tell people I'm coming and you kind of just set up your meetings and just try to figure out who you can meet and just keep checking in. So if you guys are in school currently and you have time over the summer, just say, hey, I'm going to LA for 2 weeks and, try and figure out who you know in the industry, who are the alumni that you maybe want to meet from William & Mary. I mean, there's a couple of William & Mary folks that I've met through the industry in addition to Milan. But yeah, just figure out how you can network and set up meetings for 2 weeks and just go meet as many people as possible. And then when you come back to school, you have that network. Maybe you guys get an internship the next year, but just start slowly building your career by creating these breadcrumbs that kind of lead you to the various epicenters of the entertainment universe. I mean, I would also say, you do a lot of work in Tennessee, and obviously the agencies all have stuff in Nashville. So between Nashville, Atlanta, New York, and Los Angeles, just find a way to develop a network because we all kind of eventually know each other. It is actually a small industry for the people that are working. But if I can offer career advice, I would say start by just doing little sorties and trips out to the various epicenters of entertainment and start building your network that way would be the best advice.
And LinkedIn and Twitter can be your friend. I know social media can be an awful place, but the relationships I've built on things, you can be a part of the conversation wherever you are. If you like what, getting thought leaders and other business leaders in the industry, and you can be, all of a sudden you're friends and you're trading ideas. And I've found projects and writers and option stories off of Twitter. Obviously, social media can be an awful place. Two, I did love, go back to your previous thing. I at the beginning I mentioned Rob's one of the most educated people I know, but remember he said he was about to work at the UTA mailroom, and I think understanding that journey.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, you did, and it's just like it's the most egalitarian. You'll have a person that doesn't have a high school degree with Princeton, Harvard, MBAs, and they have equal shot of making it. I mean, the biggest difference is most likely a network, but it's that work ethic, the attitude, and learning the ropes, and that's where, when going back to that 7 to 10 years, taking advantage of that system. Now you're learning the names and you're learning how the kind of ins and outs work. I took a couple, I took a course at USC about breaking into the film industry, and they talked about having a tough skin and how much. And I was like, I'm not gonna survive that. I'm just gonna be a producer. Like I'm just gonna start. In my first 4 films, I was producer, line producer, production accountant. I learned the hard way, but you don't have to learn the hard way, and especially when you've got time on your side, kind of, for lack of a better term, humbling yourself, and knowing that it's like I got something to learn first. You get a lot of people that come out of school, especially the USC, NYU, they think they're ready. They're going to be that, because they've been taught they're going to be the next Spielberg, or they're going to be the next Scorsese, and it's just like, no, it's like until you kind of understand, the nuances, what a set sounds like, and the later part about the business, it's like it's your time to learn and make those relationships. I do want to, once again, I'm so appreciative that people that came out and people are online. I want to make sure we spend as much time as we can with your questions. What brought you here? What you have, and see if we can address it. And remember, this is an ongoing conversation. I'm Taj Milan on Twitter, and Hollywood Hindu on Instagram, easy to find. Will right here is a great example. Like I think through the school, he interned for me 2020, and he's phenomenal at writing coverage. And what a great asset that is. Rob knows, and it's like now he's in graduate school at Georgia, and now I pay him to write coverage, and I have my friends. Like if they need someone, it's like I charge my friends more than I pay. But it's just like, yeah, I got a guy, and it's just like that's invaluable while he's getting his education. It's like you're also reading more scripts, seeing what works, finding your own voice. But like we had never met until yesterday in person, but have been friends and working together for almost 3 years now. So it's just like it's a weird time, but the system and the school, there's I appreciated him reaching out, and we took a shot, and then he proved his value. And it's like now even the founder of Marginal, Sanjay, it's like, hey, what's Will think about this script? And it's like, doesn't even know Will, has never had to call Will, but knows he trusts his voice. And because we told him what we're looking for in Marginal, and it's not just, because coverage is basically a book report for so I'd love to open it up for questions. We don't want to forget the people that are online too, and can keep an eye on those questions if they come through. Like if we can answer it, there's a lot of other great panels too, but specifically about career trajectory or film industry, the business of film. We're here, we can spend 20-30 minutes on that. Don't be shy if I open it up like that, because we can fill up the time.
So I have a feeling I might already know the answer to this question based on what's already said, but how do budding filmmakers kind of get sort of producers attached to projects they're working on? How do you make those connections, kind of secure funding, all that, especially when you're just getting started and maybe don't have all those connections?
Yeah. I'll say it out loud so Rob, you can hear. We'll just start with the first part. How do budding filmmakers get producers attached to their projects?
How or why?
So, how? But I kind of want to hear the answer to why.
How do producers get actors attached to their projects?
No. Budding filmmaker get a producer attached.
Oh, got it. You got to you got to do your homework. That's the first thing. You've got to be able to present the idea in some type of tangible form. That's the thing that I always tell every filmmaker. I was like, you can't tell me about this great idea you have for a film, and if you don't have at least a one-pager or a deck or a short or something that shows me that you're making strides towards accomplishing your dream and or seeing your vision through. So that's the first thing that I always start with. So I need a treatment. I need to understand what your vision for your project is. And then we go from there. We just have several conversations about just how, what are your comps? What are you thinking are the things? That's the how of a filmmaker for me, is show me how you plan to make this or why you want to make this. Make it real for me. And for me, I have a certain taste of type of projects that I want. I won't, dramas are not for me. But if you can write a great action thriller or just like a mediocre action thriller, that is the type of movie that I want to make all the time. Just because, given my background at Magnolia, I just saw how for a young filmmaker, if it's somebody that is budding, setting your project in genre and having something that I know can sell and is not necessarily, every film is execution dependent, but having a project that is that I know I can translate and kind of share with the world and get as broad of an audience as I possibly can to help recoup the money. Because, the sad reality is that most films that get to market don't make money. And so for me, it's all about risk mitigation. So yeah, I think that's the how, is how are we going to make your vision at a price for somebody that's a nascent filmmaker? How are we going to make it for a price and help the project to find an audience? And if you have an idea of how to find your audience, that is the thing that I think for me with filmmakers is the most impressive. Just like, who you're making this film for and you can articulate it. That's for me. What about for you, Milan?
I think one of the hardest things is getting through the noise. If I don't already know you, if I don't have the proclivity to, I need to help you. You're part of my network. It just makes it easy. It's breaking through the noise. I think Franklin Leonard of the Blacklist said a few years ago, it's like you go from finding the needle in the haystack to somehow trying to become the metal detector. So how can you get someone's attention? Well, there's Twitter, there's competitions, there's labs. Every major festival has labs. There might be labs that are very tailored to whether it's women or LGBTQ or people of color. Finding those labs, because it just makes it easier to get some other validation first, or you can get your scripts reviewed and get coverage on Blacklist and they give it a score. And there's certain producers that will take a look at almost everything that gets above an 8. Now, every time the advice isn't going to be want to be here. It's just what you want to hear. The advice isn't always right. So I usually say make sure you get two or three pieces. But it's like getting through the noise, because it's a Herculean task to get something from script phase to physical production to distribution. So you're seeing viral videos go, make the short film that's just a scene from your movie, enter that into film festivals. Now you're a filmmaker at that film festival. Nobody's like, oh, but you made a short, we made a full length. No, you're a filmmaker. Now you're meeting more people, able to show your work. So a big part is cutting through the noise. It's like, of all the projects I'm looking at, why yours right now? Otherwise, it's it's what Rob said earlier today, look to the left, look to the right, find those people that are your people, and you're gonna just do it. Like, I do always say, just because you can raise money doesn't mean you should. We got a very fragile ecosystem. Like, every high net worth individual gets hit up for money, and invariably you'll talk to them and they'll be like, oh, I invested in film once. I lost all my money. And then you'll ask them questions, and then it turns out it was their nephew. And it's like, oh, maybe the whole industry doesn't work. Maybe it's your nephew that's a dummy, like, but that's now taking money out of the ecosystem. So always protecting the ecosystem in the long game, but breaking through the noise is, if you're trying to, and as Rob said, doing your homework. It's like, what kind of films has this person made? Like, IMDb and IMDb Pro that you have to sign up for as your friend. Like, and you start seeing those like patterns, what people are looking at, and not just necessarily thinking like someone from the top is going to reach down and bring you all the way up. That's why putting in the work and the lateral networking. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna start using that more. Is so important. More questions?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm an aspiring writer, and I'm at a point in my life where I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to grad school immediately after undergrad or not. But I've heard a lot of conflicting opinions about whether getting an MFA is really all that advantageous. And I know you guys had very different experiences than like majoring in film or majoring in English in college. But I'm wondering if it's your experience in the industry right now that people who spent more time like academic settings, specifically for writing, are getting anywhere in terms of writing for the screen. Because I am at a very serious crossroads right now.
No, we're gonna answer that a few different ways. Did you hear that question?
I did.
Yeah. What do you think?
I did, and I have an MFA, and my MFA got me my first job in the industry. But specifically for screenwriters, I can think just off the top of my head of 3 writers that I know who went to either USC or University of Texas at Austin for screenwriting specifically. And I actually know there's another one that went to Iowa, and they're all working in the industry right now. Especially if you're pivoting from another career, taking that time out to focus on the craft of writing is really important. I never focused on writing, but I ended up, for my thesis as part of the MFA program at USC, I had to write something, and what I wrote got me so many meetings that changed the trajectory of my career, because then I knew all of these creative executives. And so I spend half my time writing now, trying to get projects, get projects that I'm developing made to give to directors that I like. But I had that MFA background, and I understood that the purpose of going to an MFA program and all grad school, I mean, I went to law, I figured this out when I was at William & Mary for law school. You go to grad school to come out of grad school with a job. And that's taking that time to understand that that's the most important use of your time, because otherwise, I mean, it depends on your discipline level, but before I went to film school, I just took all these night classes at UCLA, and I started making shorts, and I started writing screenplays on my own on the side, like at night. Like, I'd leave work at the firm and drive to UCLA at like 7:30 at night, and just like took writing your first screenplay class. And I just started writing every weekend. I'd say, okay, I'm going to write 10 pages today. So you can do it on your own. And I've entered contests. I've never won a contest. I think the furthest I've ever made it in a contest is a semifinalist. So I would say the contests are tough, but just everyone's sending in, it's really hard to break through the noise of a screenwriting contest. So the MFA program, you're going to have more time and the ability to rub shoulders with people. So I would say, if you have the ability to afford an MFA program and go to an MFA program, then yes, it won't hurt for you to focus on developing that skill set. But if you can't necessarily afford all of that, then you just have to create a plan and a roadmap to get where you want to go.
That's as good an answer. Like, I'm not gonna say too much on top of that because I know it's very easy. It's like, oh, I said the whole CPA start that makes it sound like film school doesn't do anything, but it's that focus on the craft. I will throw it, well, you made that decision for yourself. So like, I feel like I'm 23 years out from here. So it didn't go. So do you want to share any advice?
Yeah, so I'm about to finish my MFA at Georgia. It's a directing program, but they also have a writer program too. I know a lot of people. Yeah, I think what he said makes a lot of sense, but I think one of the best things, and it's kind of like we were talking about, like lateral networking, is like you are in such close proximity to a lot of people that are really serious about what they want to do. I've met people that want to be producers, and they can also help you with not just your writing, but any projects you're working on. So it's really great. That's like, I think the best thing I've found from it is just you kind of instantly get into like a pretty small, but like helpful community. And then like professors are great too. So
Yeah, and that community just keeps expanding. It's like you're finding where you fit in, and like one of the hardest things about writing is just having enough life experiences to write about. So it's just like but that advice, if it makes sense financially and all that, you could always work on the craft, but to be able to focus on it, or to it's extremely competitive. So anything you can give to your advantage, writing is rewriting, right? So it's like it's just putting in I'm just like throwing like then Malcolm Gladwell, it's putting you near 10,000 hours. Like it's all that. It's because then you're ready to more present your work, right? It's just like fundamentally it's sound, right? Structure is a sound. And then once you know the rules, you can start breaking the rules.
Thank you.
I want to type it in the chat, maybe.
Any questions from online?
Try to speak if you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
So I had two questions. I can't remember the first one. The second one was about like you guys talking about entertainment like epicenters. So like in Nashville and Georgia. I personally am a senior and I'm not ready to go to New York City or LA like mentally. So I was wondering if you guys can talk about like the ones in the South and what you think of them.
Look, it depends what you're doing. If you're trying to get onto set, there's a lot of sets in Atlanta and Savannah, and if you're trying to get into a writer's room, well, most of those are in LA, so it kind of depends what you're doing. But even if you need to take some time to build and make and create and be somewhere else first, that's okay. It's still part of that, 7 to 10 year journey I keep referencing. I'm from a small town in Indiana. I was in Northern Virginia for the first 4 years. That all helped me build the confidence to go to a place like LA. I don't think I would have made it. As Rob said, it takes about a year to get your footing, but even to make LA start feeling like home, and then you start finding your community, and then it becomes a lot of fun because you got a lot of other people from around the country that said, you know what, I'm going to go out to LA, and you share that dream, and it's exciting. You meet some of the most talented, creative people on the planet. So it's good for you on multiple levels of inspiration and that. So don't feel that pressure. Like if you want to get on a set, go to Atlanta. Like, I helped Kentucky write their tax credit in 2014. Ethan Hawke just wrapped like a $8 to $10 million film. You can really kind of wear a lot of hats and be a part of those smaller filming communities. Follow the tax credit, or just create shorts in your own community until you're ready to make it. But if you're trying to be on set, you can be anywhere. But if you want to be part of that, that that creative mind, then New York and LA are important, but I understand, a part of my journey includes 3 years of house sitting. Like that made rent for free. I had to walk a dog a couple times a day, clean up a lot of dog shit, but it was important because I didn't know how to do, I don't have talent as a writer, or people just, friends are like, oh, I'm going to go off and do this. It's just like, and I didn't want to go back and be an auditor or CPA. So it is a hustle, and just to find your way, and are you willing to make that sacrifice? I'm sure you are, because this is like this. MJ's impressive. MJ asked a question at Four Samosas. MJ asked, found me on LinkedIn. Like you're going to be just fine, MJ.
But if you can go to New York or LA, do it, and start creating those networks, because you never know where that olive branch is going to come that is going to make you feel ready to make the leap. I always said I wasn't going to move to LA unless I had a job. I wasn't moving out there, and fortunately, because of my legal background, I was able to get a job before I actually made the move. But you definitely want to start building your networks there, because at some point, especially if you're putting in the time and just checking in with people. I used to always make fun of my friends who, like, right out of college and law school, were always sending me like their little like fridge postcards. But now I'm like, oh wait, the fridge postcard is actually a great way to just like always kind of give a check-in, or just like the Christmas card follow-up, because you got to follow. It's really hard to, I wish they had a Salesforce for entertainment industry networking, because it's like maintaining, when you meet so many people, you've just got to maintain those relationships. Or at least when you see them in Deadline and Variety, drop people a line and be like, hey, congrats, or what's going on? Let's catch up. But it is important to keep expanding your network however you can, once for those.
Yeah, proximity, that's why, I tell people like Sundance, I think Sundance is worth 4 to 6 months in LA or New York, because the sheer amount of people that you could meet in one day to organize a lunch, coffee, dinner, and drinks is not easy, especially as people are high, like you get rescheduled on left and right. Everybody assumes somebody's going to cancel, so they make 3 plans for the same time and perpetuate this awful cycle of flakiness. I don't do that, but that's most of I've been on Ubers halfway across the city just to get a call. Oh, we need to reschedule. It's like, but that proximity of running into people is important. And even LA and New York has a lot of pockets of affordable living. In my old neighborhood, very, very close to the base of the Hollywood sign, like you had people that were just starting out waiting tables, but you had Brad Pitt and Christopher Nolan, and they're all operating in the same neighborhood and interacting, and that's something that you can't replicate anywhere else. But it's that fine balance, just like giving advice about going to graduate schools. We know it costs a lot. That's a huge barrier to entry. But I think those smaller environments are great too, and you start seeing teams forming, and it can keep you employed as you figure out your bigger plan.
You do need to develop a thick skin. I just want to just piggyback, because I know early when I got into the industry, I would go to like different entertainment conferences, or entertainment law conferences specifically, and I'd meet big time agents, but they happen to be lawyers as well, and or big time talent. And you try to set a meeting with them. And I was really bad about this early in my career. But I got rescheduled on, I must have gotten, like, I remember there's one guy who's a big wig who rescheduled on me maybe 6 times in the span of 2 months. But he's a big person. And he just like announced a huge company that he was starting. And it was just so frustrating. And I just stopped emailing him. Like I just quit resetting. And I told him about that like 2 years ago. I just said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. He's like, that's where I know you. Like, he's just like, why'd you stop? And I was just like, because, you get canceled on 6 times, or, and I just was so young. I just didn't know better. But yeah, this industry, especially when you're dealing with, people that, you're, they all know who everyone is. And if they don't know who you are, then it's just, you're going to get pushed down. But as long as they're still rescheduling, at some point, you've got to hold on. So I would just say, make sure to also develop a thick skin and be patient and persevere. I always tell people when I meet them and I give them my email address or phone number, I say, look, if I don't follow up with you, or, you haven't gotten a response in 2 weeks, I'm telling you, feel free to follow up. and I would just tell all of you, when you meet people, don't be too pushy, but, be polite, but maintain a thick skin and persevere if this is really what you want to do.
Yeah, I think everyone would be better off, like our industry is like, if people just followed up, they'd be like 80 to 90% more successful. I started after a few years, I made it like the rule of like 3. If I follow up 3 times and don't, it's like, it's not our time. It's okay. It's okay. I don't hold a grudge except with a few, because I used to, after one, take it very personally, but you don't, especially if we learned anything about the last 2 years, is to have extra empathy. You don't know what's going on in people's lives. They're just doing the best they can. They often have bosses and they're trying to make their own stuff. So like, if after 3 times you're not getting, it's like, okay, I'll come back around. And it's amazing. All of a sudden you show up in the trades, who's in your email box? Like our industry is like, there's a lot of people that they can wield a lot of power for a little bit, and then they lose that job, and then all of a sudden, oh, how they acted when they were in that position of power is going to be the difference between them. Like it's, obviously I'm never rooting for anyone's like downfall, but that ladder coming down is harsh if you weren't a good a good part of that ecosystem, and it's, people ask why I go to like this, smaller film festivals, or go, whether it's William Mary or even going back to my hometown in Indiana. It's like, it's like, I want to be the type of producer I wish existed. That's interesting that we have that in common, Rob. Like, I was looking for that mentor that never appeared. And that was hard, and maybe it was because we had our own skill set before, and maybe that made it harder to find that pairing. But it's probably the biggest reason. It's like, at South by this year, I'll be a mentor not only for South by, for the first ever South Asian house and that's become important, because so the next generation of South Asians and other, people of color, it's like that, there's that line, if you can see it, you can be it. And we're still in the early, unfortunately, we're still in the early stages of that. And that just means there's so many more stories out there. But what other questions do we have?
An online question.
Online question.
Claire. So kind of going back to your LA, New York, Claire asks, to what extent do editors, especially in the documentary world, need to be worried about these epicenters?
Editors.
Epicenters. Like as a documentary filmmaker, does she need to be worried about being in LA, New York, or any of these majors?
I would say it's all about, goes back to building that network, right? If find the filmmakers that are making stuff, because man, I admire editors. It's a lonely endeavor. They're built differently, but man, obviously they make the film. I helped a couple editors get their start. They're working for a fraternity brother of mine at National Geographic right now. So that's that's DC based. So you could be doing short stories on a local news channel. It's how do you meet those people to trust you with their film? All the money's gone into it. So how do you build that trust? That's where the epicenters become important. I know it's so hard, because like writing by nature is an isolated experience, but then people are saying, wait, you got to be social too. Editing, it's like you're asked to wear a lot of hats. it's not easy. And so that epicenter just gives you those extra reps. But if you make a great short film, if you make a great story piece, and people are like, who edited that? That's how I, the editor for My Friend Dahmer, when the producers of Old Henry were looking for an editor, I was like, go with Jamie. And it's just, it's very much either a word of mouth game or wear your name on the credits, and eventually people will find you. Like the cool thing, good byproduct of the pandemic is a lot of those post houses really up their game when it comes to how quick, like the bandwidth, it's all the technical stuff that I'm not an expert at, but you can do a lot remotely. But it's like, how do you get in that pipeline at first? It's either through your work or through your connections. And if you can do that from other places, if you can do that at film festivals, it's just like, it's an interesting industry. Like you wouldn't build a car like you build a film set. Like we just trust all these people know how to do their work. And then you get on set and you say you have like 20 days. And it's like, if you built a car like that, you would have a lot of problems, but we keep doing that. So it's like, oh, cool. Like we'll see what, and a film really is a village. So anytime a director, like this is my film, it's just like, it's understanding everybody's roles in making that product. So I think, we've said a bunch with the networking, or let your work speak for yourself.
We have another question from MJ. Do you have any thoughts on the field of entertainment journalism / film reviewers? We have had a senior writer from EW in here, and I was curious about the perspective of them from the side of the creators.
Yeah, take that.
I think it's tough. It's a love-hate relationship is what I think I would say, because critics and journalists have so much power over the lifeline of your film. And you look at something like a Rotten Tomatoes and all these like critical aggregators, and you just wonder how that, it's frustrating. I mean, when I did Sprinter, I remember just thinking, I was just like, there was a review from the LA Times, and the person, like, they didn't love the film, but they didn't hate it either. And it was just like a very middling review. And I remember reading it, and I was so angry with the reviewer, because out of all the reviewers we had, it was like it was out of the first 10 reviews, but it was like the one that took me from, say, a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes to an 80, or it took me to like a 77, which is just below fresh, or just below certified fresh. And so when people are deciding to watch your movie, you end up in this position where you are dependent on these people. And if the person that is the journalist in your film has no experience, especially for films from people of color or marginalized groups, especially, and they say that, they have an issue with the subtitles on your film, and that's the thing that kind of took it out. It's so frustrating. It's very frustrating. But on the flip side of that, I've had wonderful experiences with reviewers and with journalists who just promote filmmakers that I love, and being able to introduce the world to certain filmmakers that, I've built up enough relationships with critics and journalists over the past few years, especially because of some of the networking that I've done at Sundance and other film festivals, where if you can get a piece written about someone and or a film for your friend or just for your project and help them to sustain a career, that's a very important place. And so I want to see, especially for people of color, I want to see more journalists and reviewers and critics, because I think it's important to have some type of cultural nuance when you're giving critiques of projects.
Yeah, it definitely is love, hate. I used to hate critics until I kind of understood it. Earlier I was talking about the, breaking through the noise. We need critics for amplification. The hate part was like specifically 2013. I felt like literally getting those bad not positive reviews. 2013 was an interesting year at Sundance. First ever year, 50% of the films in competition, including ours, were directed by a woman. But if you look at the average like critical reviews of the film, somehow 7 of the bottom 8 were women-directed films. Like that doesn't seem like a statistical outlier, because especially 10 years ago, most of the critics were also white cis male, right? And now we're seeing we need more voices and perspectives. Yet, as Rob said, okay, somebody saying the subtitles throw me off. Well, maybe sometimes you see critics that are going after the filmmaker or the film they wish they saw, and not at all. But like at the same time, they're also pursuing the arts, and writing is critical. And I also made the mistake 10 years ago, thinking like, well, they couldn't make this movie, and and that's the wrong take to have. It's a codependent relationship, and I mean, journalism in general, we need and want them to succeed and have because it only helps amplify our films that don't have $50 million, $100 million marketing